Hi guys, this is Asal. I'm studying for the bar and I wanted to review my notes with you. So today I'm studying self-defense and I'm going to start off by talking about the elements of self-defense and then I'm going to talk about the battered wife syndrome. So here we go. Are you ready? Write it down. The first element of self-defense is that the defendant can't have been the aggressor. The second element of self-defense must be necessary. Self-defense must have been necessary. The third element, self-defense must be proportional to the threat. The fourth element, the threat must be unlawful. And the fifth, the threat must be imminent, okay? And the sixth, the defendant belief that the threat is imminent and the self-defense is necessary must be genuine and reasonable. Okay, so there's also this battered wife syndrome defense that it comes from the psychology of women who are constantly getting beat up, and then the husband comes back with flowers and apologizes, and like she kind of learns that like learned helplessness, and she feels like, okay, if I'm gonna run away, the husband of mine, he's gonna chase me, and like I don't have a chance to live anymore. So it's basically like a battered wife syndrome where there's like no imminent threat, but the wife ends up killing the husband, and she's gonna use this. So basically how she would apply this is there must be repeated beatings and plus apologies plus more beatings. So the husband comes, he beats her up, and then, oh, I'm sorry, babe, and then he beats her up again. And then this condition of extreme dependency and learned helplessness, and basically the abuse can't leave the abuser. So that's the battered wife syndrome. I'm gonna move on to what's the difference between traditionally and today. How do they define a deadly force? Okay, so traditionally a deadly force there was a proportionality requirement. The deadly force could not be used against a non-deadly threat. But today it is permitted against threats of imminent death or serious bodily harm, or when there is like rape or kidnapping or robbery. Okay, so now I'm gonna move on, and I would like to describe it under the Model Penal Code. So self-defense under the Model Penal Code requires the reasonable belief that such force is immediately necessary for purposes of protecting the defendant against the use of unlawful force by another person on the present occasion. So, under the Model Penal Code, the defendant was reckless or negligent as to the justifiability of using self-defense, plus defendant commits an offense for which the negligence or recklessness suffices for liability. So over here, if these two conditions are met, no defense is allowed. Okay, so under the self-defense, it can't be used to resist arrest. So basically, if the police is arresting you, you can't like start beating him up and use self-defense in that. But there's an exception to this case. Okay, the exception is that if the defendant believes that the officer intends to use excessive force in making his arrest. Okay, so I would like to move on to like under the Model Penal Code, the deadly force may be used against threats of death, basically death, serious bodily harm, kidnapping, and forcible rape. What I just said. Use of deadly force against home intruders. Is that allowed? It is allowed as long as the defendant believes that the intruder is trying to dispossess the defendant, the intruder has no legitimate claim to do so, and the use of force is immediately necessary to prevent the disposition. Okay, is there a duty to retreat? That's the last thing I would like to talk about. And I kind of like to talk about how different states apply this duty of retreat. Half the states required it if it can be done completely safely. And then a handful of states, they don't require it, considered in determining whether self-defense was necessary, and remaining of the states not required. So retreat from the use of deadly force, just half of the states usually, require it. And then there's also another exception. This is the exception, the castle rule. The castle rule, one need not retreat when threatened in one's home. So basically, if you're in your own home, you don't need to retreat before you defend yourself. And then a retreat from the use of deadly force is required if the defendant knows it can be done in complete safety. So this is pretty much everything I wanted to say about self-defense. I wanted to keep this video under 5 minutes. I'm going to make another video, and then I'm going to talk about defense of property and defense of others. Have fun studying. Cheers!